Today's show is sponsored by Ravello. Having a hard time hiring engineers? Ravello lets you sidestep the competitive U.S. talent market by helping you hire skilled remote engineers in Latin America. They provide full-time senior engineers with 5+ years of experience who are embedded in your team like a normal hire. Ravello is an end-to-end solution that handles sourcing, vetting, hiring, payroll, and compliance. They also don't force you to pay for things you don't want, like a project manager. You can interview any engineer before deciding. All engineers are proficient in English and have high time zone alignment with US-based teams. You don't have that painful 24-hour turnaround where you have a question for an engineer who is on the other side of the world. Check out Ravello today. Go to ravello.com/cloudcast. Check it out. That's REVELO.com/cloudcast.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Middle of May 2022. Hope everybody's doing well. Spring is in full bloom, and we're starting to get into trade show season, event season. KubeCon EU is coming up by the time you listen to this. KubeCon EU will be kicking off over in Valencia, Spain. Probably be a lot of announcements. We'll try and cover some of those in the Wednesday show and the Cloud News of the Week. What we're going to do, we're on a Sunday show. We're not doing a Sunday perspective this week. Like I said, we're going to try and do those every other week. But we've got a great show for you this week. Like we mentioned there, we had a really big push, a lot of backlog. We're going to get out a number of really good shows up both on Sundays and Wednesdays for a little while. But what I want to try and do in this first segment is, we oftentimes do Cloud News of the Week, or we're introducing the Sunday Perspectives. But when we're not doing Cloud News of the Week or the intro to Sunday Perspectives, we want to use this as a way to highlight some things that are interesting in the community, some things that we think you'll find valuable, and try and help out the community as well. So the community has always been great for us and helping us grow the show. So what we want to do in this quick segment is we want to highlight some friends of the show, some members of the community, John Culkin and Mike Zazon, who have just written a book called AWS Cookbook. And what it is basically, it is a practical guide that provides over 70 self-contained recipes. So basically what these guys did was they took about 70 common use cases, challenges that people have when using AWS, got together with the folks from O'Reilly and wrote a really interesting book. And we think it's a book that folks would probably like. And one of the things we'd like to do is a couple of things. You'll see all these in the show notes, so you don't have to remember them. But you'll see a couple of things. You'll see part of the book is freely available through GitHub, and we'll put a link to that. There is a link for a free 30-day trial. If you want, we'll put that in there as well. And we're also going to give away 3 digital copies of the book. So what I want you to do, if you'd like to get a free digital copy of the book, is send an email to show@thecloudcast.net. You got to send us send it from a legitimate email address. Don't send us some random thing, because we're going to pick 3 winners, and John and Mike will respond back to you with a free digital copy. So we're not collecting the emails for anything else. We're not going to sell them. We're not going to spam you with anything. We're just using this for the giveaway. But first, so we're going to take this for a couple of days. If you are interested in the book, send us an email. Just put AWS Cookbook in the title. That way we'll know it's from you. And let us know, what types of challenges you have in running AWS, right? One sentence. My biggest challenge is this, and we will pick 3 winners. We'll announce the winners on air probably next week on Sunday or something like that. But, these folks are experts in this space. I've been working in this space for a while. I think it's an interesting book. It's a good book and a chance for you to get either, a few free chapters of it through GitHub and O'Reilly, or if you want to try and get a free copy of it as well, or if you want to buy the book, that's great as well. But we wanted to highlight those folks here in the opening segment, and then we're going to kind of get to the show. And this week's show is an interesting show. We're going to dive into really kind of, how do we manage sensitive data? How do we manage data that, we don't want to have, taken and removed? And, how do we manage and govern sensitive data, which, these days with hacks happening all the time and, things getting stolen and so forth, if you're responsible for that sort of stuff, this should be very interesting to you. So we're going to get to that right after the break. Today's show is sponsored by Datadog, now offering CI visibility. Datadog provides deep performance insights into pipelines and tests across your CI providers. Build and platform engineering teams have a single pane of glass into their entire CI system to identify regressions, areas of optimization, and streamline their debugging process to ensure smooth and reliable workflow. You can now get high-level metrics into each pipeline, then drill down further to identify the specific errors and failure rates, or any error-prone jobs. On tests, CI visibility will automatically surface flaky tests to help developers raise the bar on testing quality and restore confidence in test results. Learn more by signing up for a free 2-week trial by visiting datadog.com/frontend-cloudcast. That's datadog.com/frontend-cloudcast. As a special offer, Cloudcast listeners who sign up now will receive a free Datadog t-shirt.
Still using SSH keys, RDP logins, and database credentials? It's time to access your infrastructure like it's no longer 1999. StrongDM is the only modern infrastructure access platform. It creates a seamless, secure, and observable air gap between your staff and the critical infrastructure that powers your company. Instantly revoke access to every database, Kubernetes cluster, or server with a click. Automatically log every query, SSH, and kube control command to know who did what, when, and where across your stack. Eliminate credentials from end-user workflows to deploy access that's zero trust and least privilege by default. Trusted by your peers at Peloton, SoFi, Yext, and Chime, StrongDM is the only way to deploy secure access controls in a way folks love to use. But who believes an ad? Check it out for yourself with a no BS demo. Sign up at www.strongdm.com/get-a-demo.
And we're back. And folks, as much as we may not like it, we see more and more things in the news these days, more and more headlines, unfortunately, more and more, stories about information getting stolen, information, companies getting breached, companies getting hacked, and people losing information, whether that's credit card information or personal information or whatever it might be. It seems that no matter how much we really try, IT teams, security teams try, the hackers are kind of always out there. And so, it's always good for us to kind of go back sometimes and look at, what are the good best practices? What are the best sort of hygiene things to do? How do we keep information safe? How do we avoid it, end up, becoming a headline and so forth? And so today I thought it'd be fun to dig into this with some folks who spend a lot of time focused in this space. So excited to have Pranay Kamat, who is product management for sensitive data scanning over at Datadog, our friends at Datadog. Pranay, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Yep. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, so this is great. So I want to dive into this topic. This is the space that you spend a lot of time in. But before we dive into that, give us a little bit about your background. Kind of where some of your history, but then maybe more so where you focus on today at Datadog.
So I'm a product manager at Datadog. I'm based in New York. I've been with Datadog for the last 2 years. I oversee our log management, sensitive data detection, and auditing capabilities. Prior to Datadog, I worked at companies like Exabeam in the security space and SolarWinds for log management. And during the last 6 to 7 years, I've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of different customers in different geographies and industries, in how they have been adopting cloud, how they have adopted new observability and security practices.
Nice. Well, I mentioned at sort of the top of this segment that we continue to see headlines. We continue to see critical information, being breached, being stolen, being compromised, and so forth. For folks maybe who don't live and breathe this every day, they're just kind of seeing headlines. Kind of give us a picture of where are we with sort of the challenges of this problem. What's maybe what's sort of causing some of the headlines. Obviously, things that that hackers go where the money is and so forth. But kind of give us a bigger picture of how you focus around this space and what are the concerns that the companies you work with. What are they? What keeps them up at night?
Yeah, great question. I mean, unfortunately, we see that data leaks or data being stolen is unfortunately very common. And we hear that a lot, where companies run into this problem. And when they do, they don't have the right tools to manage it and respond to it when such a thing happens. But taking a step back, what we really see are like systems that are becoming more complex. More applications being interconnected through APIs, through integrations. A lot of big companies now relying on multiple cloud services or even third-party services for things like payments, login, supply chain, among other things. And what this means is, the people that actually access these applications and services also end up kind of touching all these different integrations. It also means that the data volume is continuously growing. And even in this kind of a situation, the big issue still remains lack of visibility. And what I mean by that is, often when we get on conversations with companies, whether it's an insurance company, a financial company, or a healthcare company, they say the same thing. They lack visibility. They're not sure like what's in their observability data, like logs or traces. And those who may have some idea of it, often end up underestimating, what's there. And so when most customers talk about like data leaks or are worried about data being stolen or accessed by people who shouldn't have access to it, and what keeps them up at night is really just lack of visibility on their exposure, and they come to us just trying to understand better, like, hey, what's going on in my data, who has access to it, and they want to know more about it. And what's interesting is that even those companies who feel more confident about this, that they have everything covered, when they start turning on some of our services to look for sensitive data, they find stuff that freaks them out. But the good thing now is that they know who to talk to. They know what's the source of this, why it's happening, when it started, and they can have that kind of a conversation. Okay. Sensitive data can actually mean a lot of things. Different customers, when I speak to them, it can be whether you're a small startup or an e-commerce company, or if you're operating in a regulated space, you're going to pay attention to different details in what's captured in your logs or traces. You have the usual suspects, SSNs, credit cards, location details, and other stuff. But then there are a lot of other things like API keys, access tokens, and those have significant consequences too.
Yeah. I'm curious, and I may have misunderstood. You said, one of the challenges they have is that, like, if they are breached, sometimes they don't necessarily have the right tools and know what to do, at that time. Mm-hmm. Do you find that the problem is typically sort of pre-breach, right? Like I don't have the right tools looking and keeping track of things, or is it more post-breach? Like, what do I do now that some hacker group has announced mm-hmm. things? Like, do I think about pre-tools and post-tools, or is it really just kind of an ongoing cycle that I'm constantly having to be thinking of?
It's you got it right. It's an ongoing cycle. In most cases, when you read what you read in the news is often some headline about a post breach, right? Like some company had an unfortunate incident. But all the time, usually it's security and DevOps teams looking to proactively get better understanding of their systems, because they too read right in the news and they don't want to be the next headline. So often a lot of the emphasis is on things like, what can we do today? What's happening in my data today? And what should I be prepared for? And that's what really kind of drives their thinking behind actively looking for solutions or workflows or any kind of capability that will kind of help them get ahead of the curve. Yeah.
And when you talk about sensitive data, you made a point to say that not every company looks at sensitive data the same way, right? Like, if I'm credit cards, you'd think obviously, what people call PII, yep. personal information. Maybe it's source code, maybe it's like you said, access keys. How do you go about kind of identifying that stuff? Because I would think, there's certain sort of well-known filters for things mm-hmm. like credit cards and other things, but like, are you doing it just to sort of say, I don't want that stuff to get taken by non-authorized users, or are there, are you tagging them so that they don't get sort of attached to ransomware? Like, kind of maybe dive maybe a little bit deeper into what that means of identifying what's sensitive, and like, how do you think about protecting it, or what's the thought process?
Yeah, and a lot of companies, the way they think of it is more and more there is that awareness that you only want to let people access when they have a need for it, right? And so a lot of developers, when they are adopting cloud services, which has made it easier for them to build their applications, they will have API keys or some tokens that allow them to do their operations. And when they're actually building their observability telemetry, they will try to include some of this information because they are trying to recreate what may have happened. This is especially useful when they are troubleshooting. So they're thinking it from that troubleshooting lens, not entirely kind of sure whether this is okay, whether this could be misused by somebody who might have access to it. We often kind of see, in the news where people say somebody's S3 bucket was exposed because it was not secured. And what this means is it's not just about unauthorized access to bad actors, but it could be really anyone, right? Like you can imagine a scenario where somebody has some API keys to, let's say, a payment processing system, and those keys authenticate your business or your team specifically. If they are lying around exposed to anyone, somebody could use those keys then to misrepresent, misidentify, and then kind of take benefit of that payment processing in your name, and which is not good. Right. So it's not just protecting such information like keys and tokens from outside actors, but your own employees, your partners. It could be anyone. You want to keep it safeguarded. You don't want to expose them when it's not needed, and you want to kind of revoke them or redact them once their use is done, which is usually what a lot of businesses would think of as a good practice or a hygiene. But unfortunately, they struggle kind of being in that place.
Okay. Yeah. So there really is quite a bit of context around it. There's life cycles around it, and there's sort of this, flywheel or loop, if you will. Okay. Makes sense. So I'm curious, sometimes when I would think about this space, it would be associated with kind of a technology or an acronym called DLP, right? Data loss prevention. How is the way that you think about this? Is it similar? Has it really evolved? Is it things different now that we're in the cloud? Is there a way to kind of compare and contrast those things, or are we talking about sort of a next generation? Because, like you said, different amounts of volume, different amounts of team working on applications. How do they fit together?
Yeah, I mean, DLP has been, data loss prevention has been around for a while. We see a lot of, traditional enterprise customers like banks or insurance who kind of who have relied on these capabilities for a long time. It usually is a wider conversation in a large organization. It involves many teams, their applications, and it's part of like a broader company-wide data management policy. It often has relied on firewalls, scheduled queries, and batch reporting, very reactive. And so, when we talk to customers, what we always heard was that, in this new day and age, where there is high velocity of data and there is so much variety, that being reactive, relying on these solutions is not sufficient. Like there was one customer, a banking customer, who once said that they have like 10 different scripts to identify just what is leaving their systems, who owns that data, and then whether that's okay or not, and what happened in those cases. Even with those scripts, it doesn't cover their telemetry data, which is huge, which is constantly increasing, right? They traditionally would have monitored their applications like Salesforce or Workday, but not necessarily what goes into their application logs or their traces. And that's where we see a lot of the new kind of emphasis coming in. A lot more eyes, people paying attention to telemetry data, which can contain, as we talked, like a lot of sensitive information. But the good thing is that these logs, traces, or user actions that people perform on a website are sort of well defined in kind of a data structure. So automation is very useful and kind of can be helpful in these cases. You can add in more context for these data types, where you can say these logs or these user actions belong to a particular team, or they belong to a specific application or a service, which means that when you're actually combing through all that data to build proactively alerts, which is very different from what you would have done traditionally, waiting for exfiltration or DLP to notify you. Here you are proactively then looking for, like, okay, which teams have what data sources at risk. And if there is a data leak, then you know exactly whom to contact. You can get notified, you can integrate it with your remediation workflows. And this really works well with modern DevOps practices. Like, we see DevOps practitioners have playbooks, detailed run books, and which are integrated with their CI/CD processes, and you hear a lot about the whole shift left paradigm, right? So the whole idea that you're proactively looking for things that you can integrate with your existing workflows means that it gives you a big step ahead of what you would have done with your traditional DLP, and which really works in the new cloud era.
Gotcha. No, that's super helpful. I know sometimes when we talk about things on the show, we have this tendency to kind of put it into a context that we had seen before, we knew before. But I know a lot of times when we get into dealing with things in the cloud, you almost have to erase that a little bit and then kind of put it into new context. So that's super helpful. A lot of times we think about attacks coming from outside, some hacker group, it's some foreign entity, it's a nation state, whatever it might be. But a lot of times attacks come from the inside, right? Sort of the calls coming from inside of the house, whether that's done directly or indirectly. I've maybe I've watched a few too many spy movies or whatever it is. How important is it to sort of even just have good hygiene for internal logs? I mean, you've got people who, on a regular day-to-day basis have to be able to look at logs, have to be able to do troubleshooting. How do you sort of balance, hey, that person could be compromised, they could be a disgruntled worker, with, I need to give people day-to-day access to things like logs, but also I got to protect those. Like, is there a way to think about that? Is that being too paranoid? Is that a concern that companies have?
No, you hit it. I mean, only the paranoid survive, right? Like, that's how some people would put it. But no, you hit the nail on the head when you said the word balance, right? It's really about balance. Like, and a lot of organizations struggle with it. It's not easy, and we see this. Like, no matter the size of your team or the sophistication of your tools or the level of expertise you have, right? The finding that balance is an ongoing struggle. Like, everyone finds it hard. And you mentioned something about, like, employees, or if somebody's angry or something went wrong. Like, insider threat is really getting a lot of attention now. Over the last few years, some of the big attacks where the data breach starts with those kinds of things, like phishing attempts or some innocent social engineering attack, or identity theft. And that means that people are now paying attention to not only external actors, meaning your hackers or somebody outside your organization, but you're also looking at maybe that rogue employee who on their way out was angry and decided to do something, and they have access to a lot of confidential data, not just in your business applications, but in your telemetry data. We also see this in your access control policies. Like, this is very common. Like, you mentioned about how do you kind of balance that, visibility without sacrificing anything around good hygiene on compliance or governance. And really, there's no silver bullet to this. It means that teams are going to build a strong plan, like an access control plan, to look to reduce risk. It will be hard for me to say that every team or every business thinks of it as, like, how can we block all attacks? Like, I think most of the more mature organizations will look at it as, instead of blocking attacks, how do we identify them early and how do we respond to them quickly? Yep. Right? And how do you manage that risk? But again, the whole thing comes into visibility, and kind of teams have been looking at a range of options. I've seen like businesses tell me about multi-factor authentication, which you see more and more now in even day-to-day life, whether it's you're accessing your Gmail or any other service. You also have businesses thinking about data lineage, like how long the data lives, who has access to it, and coming up with like a detailed permissions model where they know exactly who might have made those changes or when they have access to it. And highly redacting data, like if somebody doesn't need to use that data or need like redact it, right? We see this traditionally in finance, but we are seeing more and more in digital startups, and e-commerce also take that position. And finally, auditing. That is something that, again, has traditionally been seen as a big enterprise type solution, but we are seeing more customers now saying, okay, rather than try to find who did what and prevent who did what, let's kind of focus on how to identify post-mortem, like who may have done what, right? And that's where kind of all these range of different options put together help businesses kind of reduce their risk.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I want to ask you one last question because I know you're a busy man. We often say that security, in today's world is, for organizations, it's sort of everybody's responsibility. It's everybody's issue, whether it's just good password management or whatever it might be. In modern terms, we tend to start to think about like platform teams, so like DevOps teams and DevSecOps, and like where does governance and keeping track of sensitive data, like where do you find that lives? Is it assigned to certain teams? Is it assigned to, where does it fit?
This is an interesting question. For the longest time, what I've seen is many organizations have dedicated teams to security, governance, or compliance, whose job has been to focus on how does GDPR affect me, or how does California Online Act affect me, or HIPAA affect me. But more and more we see that developers and DevOps, with their adoption, their new cloud adoption techniques and everything, the lines got blurred. So even though engineering owns the applications, they own the data, the compliance teams are sort of tasked with making sure that everybody is compliant. And businesses want to break these silos. What's also interesting is that if you look at it from like a team structure or a size standpoint, we often notice that the security teams and compliance teams have smaller budgets, have smaller team sizes, and kind of compared to their engineering counterparts. So the current model, what we have seen for the longest time, doesn't work or is not scaling. And more we see big teams try to break those silos where you have a director of engineering or an engineering manager work very closely with an information security expert or a director of compliance to define shared policies, evaluate software services, look at new vendors together. And this is really exciting. So, even like what it means is that everyone's looking at security as a collective responsibility. Everyone's kind of seeing this as that, it's no longer, you just look at somebody else is going to take care of it, that you are part of it. And what it does is it's really kind of bringing more attention to the space, more focus on the personas, like, how do we have DevOps and security work together? And which means, it's exciting. There'll be more innovation in the space. There'll be more people who will build more capabilities and features that will help these kinds of teams work together, have a common platform to collaborate, have a common platform to define and enforce policies across the board consistently.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, no, I think we're seeing every time that environments are moving faster. Every time we see a situation in which environments are changing more frequently. There's more pieces to applications, more interaction with third parties and partners and APIs, and we have to sort of align our teams to deal with that velocity and that volume of change. So, Pranay, this has been outstanding. This has been great. We really appreciate you. Really just educating us, giving us a sense of what's going on out there, what are the best practices, what to avoid. If folks want to pick your brain, want to dig into some of the things your team's working on, what's a good way to do that?
The best way is, you could reach out to us, at Datadog. We are always happy to listen to your problems and your use cases. So anyone listening, think of us as resources. Happy to share more about not just our products, but really what we are seeing in the industry, right? So you can contact me or via my email or reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, no, we always appreciate the partnership with the folks from Datadog. You guys are always very, very willing to share so much with us and educate us. So we really appreciate that. Well, folks, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. On behalf of Aaron and I, we want to thank Pranay for his time today, for his education, and we want to thank all of you for listening. We want to thank you for telling a friend and helping us grow the show, helping us grow the community. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.